My name is Grady Gamble. I retired in 1994 as a captain. I grew up in Carroll County, Georgia. I came to Atlanta in 1964 to take this job. It's fantastic. Several of them we worked together at one point during my career. I worked with the Chief Bell and Paul Johnson and J.P. Arnold, all those people. Matter of fact, J.P. Arnold was my training officer at one time when I first came. Well, just in general, seeing all of these folk that I have worked with over the years and the number of years I spent trying to get new officers hired for the department for like 9 years. Well, get to know the people in your community and treat people like you want to be treated. Remember the golden rule. You can never go wrong that way.
My name is Willie J. Taylor. I retired in 1992 as Assistant Chief of Police, in charge of the Field Operations Division. Well, it's sort of a reminiscence of many years ago that when I first came on the police department in 1965, all of these guys were already there probably, and I had the pleasure of being the very first black officer to integrate a watch in the Atlanta Police Department. When I graduated from Police Academy, I was assigned to Traffic Division, which was an all-white watch, and it was the first time a black man had an opportunity to work with whites in the Atlanta Police Department. Well, I've had probably some of the most choice assignments in the police department. Fortunately, I moved up through the ranks quite fast. And I went from a lieutenant to where I was in charge of the crime prevention unit, the THOR program. I was promoted to major, where I was placed in charge of the child murders and missing murdered children in 1979. And in 1988, I was placed in charge of securing the 1988 Democratic Convention here in Atlanta. And then once in 92, once I murdered Mr. Children, and my promotion to Deputy Chief, I was placed in charge of the Field Operations Division. So I've had an opportunity to share in almost every major activity that has occurred in the city of Atlanta in the past 30 years.
What advice would you give the recruits that are incoming to the police academy, or anybody that wants to be a police officer? What advice would you give them?
Well, just like in most of my friends that asked me about being a common police officer, I have to be aware of the fact that you are not coming to an institution that is going to pay well, that your service is going to be appreciated. But that if you want to service people or be a part of a community, the best way you can be an active part of that community is by being in law enforcement or the criminal justice system. But don't look forward to getting rich being a cop.
I'm LaSalle Smith, and I retired at the rank of lieutenant. And I was the first chaplain for the Atlanta Police Department. In fact, I wrote the program. And I came on in 1967, but actually I started working in 1968 because of the background. And there were only 3 officers that came in who were sworn in with me at that time. And when we came in, we had to actually go through two weeks of training at the Georgia State Patrol. And then, of course, there was only 5 weeks training when I came on the force. And it was a very devastating period for me. And some of the things that occurred, it was just incomprehensible and reprehensible from my perspective, because I was not accustomed to that. And so, for instance, that when I came on, I think it just had started allowing black officers to arrest white criminals, but they would tell us, well, we're not going to go to jail in the first place. You're wasting your time. Of course, we tell them, so we're police officers just like anyone else. And we actually put them in jail, but sometimes they were allowed to walk out the back door before we get back on our beats. And we could not work downtown Atlanta because of the racism that existed. And like Chief Bell was saying, and Floyd Reeves was saying, that when we were assigned to work with a white officer. The white officer would get sick and go home, and then we were left. But what was most devastating about the situation from my perspective is that we weren't allowed to have cars. We didn't have cars, and so we didn't have radios, and we had to go to a call box and call downtown once per hour and let them know we were okay. And it was such a devastating situation, because if we called for help, we couldn't get any help. And sometimes nobody would come because they knew that we were only black officers out on the beat. And so that situation passed, and thankful God that, we were allowed to begin arresting white criminals. And when Chief Bell came on, he appointed me as the first chaplain for the Atlanta Police Department. And I always had a great relationship with community, because I was a church leader at that time, and of course I was ordained as a pastor in 1988, and so I had a very good relationship with the community, and I understood community policing before it became basically a house name. And I found that they protected me. The criminals even protected me, because they knew that I had the personnel and I looked out for them. I was in church, and I would stop by churches and talk with pastors and talk with other leaders in the church. And so everybody knew me on the beat. And so they pretty much took care of me. And then when Martin Luther King was killed, I was assigned to Miss Coretta King and her family. So I stayed in that situation and for 22 years, and worked with her and her family and traveled with her across the country. And then I became the first black to work in the intelligence division with the Atlanta Police Department. And then I traveled all across the country, and I became the first gang specialist for the Southeast region. And I traveled across the country again, teaching and working with police departments across the country and getting them acclimated to how to deal with gangs and how to investigate gang situations. So it's just been a rewarding career, and I just thank God for, I was able to make a difference in the Atlanta Police Department. When I left in 1998, I was still a chaplain, and I worked in the uniform division, but then I became the head of public affairs for a while, and I worked with James Brown and got to know him very well and traveled with him a lot. So it was a wonderful experience. I worked Zone 6 for a while, but not long. I didn't work Zone 6 for long at all, because my expertise was dealing with community. And I was called to the mayor's office, and I was assigned to the mayor's office with Andrew Young, and I traveled all over the world with Andrew Young for about 7 years. And then I came back to the police department. I was in charge of internal affairs. And I had worked intelligence, head of intelligence for 21 years, and when I was sent back to that area. And when I retired, I just felt it was just time for me to go at that point. But I had a rewarding career, and I would come back in a heartbeat. I love it. That is my passion. I found out when a person discovers his or her passion, that is his or her purpose. And so that was my purpose in life. It did not discourage me, because I knew when I was 12 years old what I wanted to do. And I always told my mother, I'm going to be a police officer. I'm going to be a police officer. Because actually my first job was with the FBI in Washington, D.C. And my dad passed, and I came back to Atlanta, and I joined the Atlanta Police Department. And I spent 30 years with Atlanta. And what I would tell the young officers is that don't get caught up in what's happening around you in the political situation. Do what you're called to do, because it's important that if you have a passion for law enforcement, then it's the citizens they are our customers. We're there to protect them. They look to us, they look up for honesty and integrity. And just people are depressed and they're experiencing anxiety, so they need a lot of encouragement. And we are that first responders there. And stay encouraged, because things will change.
Can you tell us more about the chaplain role? Like, how did that even become like a need in the Atlanta Police Department? Is that role still kind of similar to what the chaplain does now, or was it different?
It's slightly different because what we did is that we assigned officers to all of the zones. And officers are experiencing anxiety, depression, and the studies are saying now that one in every individual in the United States of America, 1 in 5 persons experiences some kind of mental challenge. And so officers will get depressed because the long hours and the different shifts they're working, and they just needed somebody to talk to. But not only that, citizens need our help. So when I went to back to the mayor's office, the mayor immediately put me in charge of all of the housing units, presidents. I talked to housing presidents, and it was just a wonderful experience to getting them together. And I used to invite them to the precinct. We'd have meetings at the precinct because they were experiencing all kinds of anxieties and depressions, and people experiencing money challenges. So I was up to encourage them and give them uplifting words and help them to be who God called them to be.